The steam from the mashed potatoes was still rising, curling into the air like tiny ghosts. My father's face was inches from mine. I could see the broken red veins in his eyes. I could smell the bitter scent of the coffee he'd been drinking all afternoon. "You and your son," he hissed, his voice cracking like dry wood, "are nothing but parasites." The word hit me harder than a physical punch. My chest felt like it was being squeezed by an iron band. I couldn't breathe. I looked over at my mother. I expected her to gasp. I expected her to tell him he'd gone too far. Instead, she leaned back in her chair. She took a slow sip of her water and smiled. It wasn't a kind smile. It was the smile of someone watching a bug get crushed under a shoe. And the worst part? We were sitting in my dining room, at my table, in the house I paid for every single month. But before we continue, I'd love to know, where are you from and how old are you? Let me know in the comments. Happy listening. The silence that followed my father's shout was deafening. You know that kind of silence? The kind that makes your ears ring? I looked down at my plate. My hands were shaking so hard the fork was rattling against the table. Clink, clink, clink. It was the only sound in the room. My 7-year-old son, Toby, was sitting right next to me. I could feel his small body trembling. He was trying to be invisible, pulling his shoulders up to his ears, staring at his half-eaten chicken nugget. Toby shouldn't have to hear this. No child should. I remember the day they moved in 6 months ago. The air was crisp and smelled like fallen leaves. My father had lost his job. Well, he said he retired early. But we all knew he'd been let go for his temper. They had no savings. No plan. "Just for a few weeks, honey," my mom had whispered, squeezing my arm with her cold, thin fingers. "Until we get back on our feet." I felt a pang of guilt back then. I remembered them feeding me when I was little. I remembered the house I grew up in. So I opened my door. I carried their heavy leather suitcases up the stairs. I gave them the master bedroom because my dad complained about his bad back. Toby and I moved into the 2 smaller rooms down the hall. I thought I was being a good daughter. I thought I was being a hero. But the few weeks turned into months. And the guests turned into dictators. Every morning I woke up at 5 a.m. The floorboards in the hallway always groaned under my feet. A low creak sound that felt like the house was complaining. I'd slip into the kitchen to make coffee, trying to stay quiet. But my mother would always be there, sitting at the counter in her silk robe. "The coffee is too weak, Sarah," she'd say without looking up from her tablet. "And you left a smudge on the counter. It's oily. It's gross." I'd just nod. I'd wipe the counter until my knuckles turned white. My heart would be racing, a fast thump in my throat, but I never said a word. I went to work at the hospital, pulled 12-hour shifts, and came home to a house that no longer felt like mine. My father spent his days in my living room. He sat in the recliner I bought with my first big bonus. The TV was always blaring news, sports, loud shouting. The smell of his cheap cigars seeped into the curtains, into the carpet, into my very skin. He didn't pay a dime. Not for electricity. Not for the steak he demanded for dinner. Not for the heat that he kept cranked up to 75 degrees while I wore 3 sweaters to save money. That night, the night it all broke, I was tired. My back ached from standing all day. I had spent 2 hours cooking a pot roast. I wanted a nice family meal. I wanted to feel like we were a team. "Toby, did you finish your math homework?" I asked softly, reaching over to ruffle his hair. My father slammed his hand on the table. Bam! The water glasses jumped. "Don't coddle him," he barked. "He's weak. He's just like you. Always whining, always taking. You think this life is free? You think you're special because you have this house." I felt the blood drain from my face. My skin felt icy cold, like I had been plunged into a frozen lake. "Dad, please. Not in front of Toby. I'll talk whenever I want," he roared. He stood up, his chair screeching back against the hardwood floor. He leaned over the table, his shadow covering me and my son. "Look at you. Living off the memory of your late husband's insurance. Using us for childcare. You're a loser, Sarah. You and your son are nothing but parasites." I looked at my mother. Surely she would stop him. Surely, she remembered how I stayed up all night when she had the flu last month. But she just smiled that thin, sharp smile. He's right, dear, she said calmly. We do everything for this family. And you? You just exist. You're lucky we stay here to keep you grounded. Something inside me snapped. It wasn't a loud noise. It was a quiet click like a key turning in a lock. The fear that usually lived in my stomach, that heavy, hot ball of anxiety, suddenly vanished. It was replaced by a strange, freezing stillness. My heart stopped racing. My hands stopped shaking. I looked at my father. I looked at the grease on his chin from the roast I cooked. I looked at my mother's polished nails, paid for with the allowance she guilted me into giving her. I stood up. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I looked at my watch. The ticking sound of the wall clock seemed to get louder. Tick, tick, tick. It's 7 p.m., I said. My voice was so flat and calm it surprised even me. My father narrowed his eyes. What are you talking about? I leaned in, mimicking his posture. I wanted him to see the reflection of his own cruelty in my eyes. You think I'm a parasite? I whispered. You think this house belongs to you because you're loud? I grabbed Toby's hand. His little fingers were cold and he gripped me tight. I looked my father dead in the eye, and for the first time in my life I didn't look away. You have 24 hours, I said. My mother laughed, a high tinkling sound. Or what, Sarah? You're going to throw your own parents out on the street? You don't have the guts. I didn't smile back. I just felt the cold air from the air conditioner hitting the back of my neck. 24 hours, I repeated. At 7 p.m. tomorrow the locks are being changed. Your bags will be on the porch. If you are still inside this house, I'm calling the police to report 2 trespassers. My father's face turned a deep bruised purple. He started to reach for my arm, his fingers curling like claws. You wouldn't dare. I'm your father. I would, I said, stepping back. And I've already done something you didn't expect. My mother's smile finally faded. She saw the look in my eyes, the look of a person who had nothing left to lose. What did you do? She asked, her voice trembling for the first time. I pulled a small, black remote from my pocket, the one that controlled the smart home security system I'd installed last week and never told them about. I didn't just set a timer for you to leave, I said, my voice dropping to a low, dangerous growl. I also realized why the bank called me this morning about the missing money in my savings account. The account only you had the password to, Mom. The room went deathly silent. My mother's face went white as a sheet. And, I continued, I'm not the only one who knows what you've been doing. Suddenly there was a heavy rhythmic pounding at the front door. Boom, boom, boom. The pounding at the door didn't stop. It was loud and heavy, making the framed photos of Toby on the wall shake against the drywall. Thud, thud, thud. My father's hand stayed frozen in midair. His fingers still curved like he was about to grab me. The purple color in his face drained away, leaving him looking gray and old under the bright dining room lights. Who is that? He snapped, but his voice wasn't a roar anymore. It was a thin, shaky whisper. I didn't answer him. I didn't even look at him. I looked at my mother. She was clutching her napkin so hard her knuckles looked like white stones. She knew. She had to know. You don't take $50,000 from your daughter's savings account and think the world is just going to keep spinning. Sarah, she said, her voice trying to find that sweet, manipulative tone she always used. Sweetie, if this is about the money, we can talk. We were just borrowing it for your father's medical bills. We were going to tell you. The lie was so oily it made my stomach turn. I felt a cold sweat on the back of my neck. I looked down at Toby. He was staring at the front door, his eyes wide and wet with tears. Toby, baby, I said, kneeling down so I was at his level. I ignored the screaming match that was about to start. I need you to go to your room. Okay? Put on your headphones. Play that dinosaur game you like. Stay there until I come get you. Are they going to hurt you, Mommy? He whispered. His voice was so small it broke my heart into a million pieces. I squeezed his hands. They were ice cold. No one is hurting anyone. I'm just taking out the trash. Go on. He scrambled out of his chair, his sneakers squeaking on the wood floor as he ran down the hall. I heard his bedroom door click shut. Only then did I stand back up to face the 2 people who had brought me into this world, and then tried to tear it down. I walked toward the front door. Every step felt like I was wearing lead boots. The air in the hallway felt thick and heavy, like I was walking through water. I could hear my father stomping along behind me, his heavy breathing sounding like a broken bellows. "You don't open that door," he yelled. "This is my house while I'm living in it. I'm the head of this family." I reached for the deadbolt. Click. I swung the door open. The night air rushed in, smelling like damp grass and rain. Standing on my porch was a tall man in a dark suit. He was holding a leather briefcase and a thick stack of papers. Behind him, parked at the curb, was a white car with a logo on the side that made my mother gasp from the hallway. It was a private investigation firm. "Sarah Miller?" the man asked. His voice was deep and professional, like a judge. "Yes," I said, my voice steady. "That's me. I have the final report you requested, along with the bank trail and the footage from the ATM on 4th Street. I took the papers. They felt heavy. They felt like justice. My father tried to push past me. "What is this? Who are you? Get off my property." The man in the suit didn't blink. He looked my father up and down like he was looking at a stain on a rug. "Sir, I suggest you step back. I'm just delivering a file. But the person in the car behind me? He's a process server. And he has something else for you." A second man stepped out of the car. He wasn't wearing a suit. He was wearing a windbreaker and a baseball cap. He walked up the steps and handed 2 bright yellow envelopes to my father. "George and Martha Miller? You've been served," the man said. He didn't wait for a thank you. He just turned around and walked back to his car. My father looked at the envelope like it was a snake about to bite him. His hands were shaking. He ripped it open, his breathing getting louder and more ragged. "An injunction," he hissed. "An emergency eviction? You're suing your own parents for the return of funds." "I'm not just suing you, Dad," I said. I stepped back and leaned against the doorframe, crossing my arms. My heart was thumping against my ribs, a fast rhythmic drum. But I felt a strange sense of peace. "I'm making sure you can never touch my credit again. I'm making sure you can't use Toby as a pawn. You called us parasites. But look at you. You're holding papers that prove you've been bleeding me dry for 6 months." My mother walked up behind him, her face a mask of fake sadness. "Sarah, how could you? We have nowhere to go. You're putting us on the street. Think of what people will say at the church. Think of your reputation." "My reputation?" I laughed and it felt good. It felt like a weight lifting off my chest. "You spent my son's college fund on a timeshare in Florida, Mom. I saw the bank transfers. I saw the signatures you forged. You didn't think I'd check the old savings account I hadn't used in a year, did you?" The silence that followed was different than before. It wasn't the silence of fear. It was the silence of a trap snapping shut. The man in the suit tipped his hat to me and walked away, leaving me alone with the 2 strangers who called themselves my parents. 24 hours, I said again. I pointed to the kitchen clock. "The timer is already running. If those suitcases aren't packed and you aren't out of that master bedroom by tomorrow night, the police will be here to escort you. And the bank is already filing criminal charges for the theft." My father's eyes turned dark. The sad old man act was gone. He stepped closer, his face turning that scary shade of red again. "You think you've won?" he whispered, his voice dripping with venom. "You think you can just kick us out and it's over? I know things about your late husband, Sarah. Things that would make Toby hate his father's memory forever. You want to play this game? Fine. But if we go down, we're taking his name with us." I felt a cold shiver run down my spine. My husband, David, had been a good man. He was a firefighter who died a hero. Everyone in town loved him. Toby looked at his father's helmet every single morning like it was a holy relic. "What are you talking about?" I whispered. My confidence flickered like a candle in a windstorm. My father smiled. It was the same cruel smile my mother had used at the dinner table. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small old-fashioned key. A key I didn't recognize. "David had a storage unit," my father said, his voice low and mocking. "One he never told you about. One I found the key to when I was cleaning the garage last month. If you want to see what's inside, you'll drop the lawsuit. You'll let us stay. And you'll give us another 50,000 for our troubles." He held the key up, dangling it between 2 fingers. It caught the light, shining like a silver tooth. "So Sarah, he said, stepping into my personal space. What's it going to be? Your money? Or your son's heart? I looked at the key. I looked at the man who was supposed to protect me, now trying to destroy my husband's legacy just to keep a free room. My mind was spinning. Was it a lie? David wouldn't have secrets. Not from me. We were happy. We were a team. But my father looked so sure. So evil. I looked down the hall toward Toby's room. I could hear the faint sound of his game, the bleeps and bloops of a happy child who thought his world was safe. I looked back at my father. My hand went to the locket around my neck that held David's picture. I don't believe you, I said, but my voice wavered. Then let's go see, my father said, jingling the key. Right now. We go to the unit. You see the truth. And then you decide if you still want us to leave. The rain started to fall outside, a soft pitter-patter against the porch. The world felt like it was closing in on me. I looked at my watch. 23 hours and 45 minutes left. I grabbed my coat from the hook. I didn't even put on my shoes properly, just shoved my feet into my sneakers. I needed to know. I couldn't let him have this power over me. Mom, I said, not looking at her. Watch Toby. If you even think about talking to him, I'll call the cops before I hit the end of the driveway. Do you understand? She nodded quickly, her eyes darting between me and the yellow envelope. I walked out into the rain, my father right behind me. We got into my car. The engine turned over with a low roar, the headlights cutting through the dark like two angry eyes. As we pulled out of the driveway, I looked back at the house. My house. Toby's window was the only light on in the dark neighborhood. We drove in silence. The windshield wipers went swish, 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 a rhythmic sound that felt like a countdown. My father gave me directions, leading me away from the nice part of town, down toward the old industrial district where the streetlights were broken and the weeds grew through the cracks in the sidewalk. We pulled up to a rusty gate. A sign hung crookedly, West Side Storage. My father got out and used the key to open the padlock on the gate. It groaned, a loud metal scream that echoed in the empty night. We drove through the maze of metal garage doors until we reached Unit 402. My heart was beating so loud I could hear it in my ears. Thump, thump, thump. Go on, my father said, handing me the key. Open it. See the man you were so proud of. I took the key. It felt heavy and cold. I stepped up to the door. My hand was shaking so much I could barely fit the key into the lock. I turned it. Clack. I grabbed the handle and lifted the heavy metal door. It rolled up with a deafening rattle. I reached for the light string and pulled it. A single dusty bulb flickered to life. I stepped inside, the smell of old paper and stale air filling my nose. And then I saw it. In the middle of the room sat a single wooden crate. And on top of that crate was a pile of documents, a thick stack of cash, and a photograph that made me fall to my knees. The dust in the storage unit tasted like copper and old memories. I stayed on my knees, the cold concrete biting into my skin. The photograph was right there, staring back at me. It wasn't just a picture. It was a bomb that had been waiting to go off for years. In the photo, my husband David was standing next to a woman I had never seen before. They were laughing. They looked happy. But that wasn't what made me gasp. It was the child in the woman's arms, a little boy with the exact same messy curls and the same bright, curious eyes as my son Toby. I felt like the floor had opened up and swallowed me. My chest hurt. It felt like someone was standing on my lungs. Recognize him? My father's voice boomed from the doorway. He was leaning against the metal frame, a smug look on his face. He looked like a king standing over a fallen enemy. David wasn't the saint everyone thinks he was, Sarah. He had a whole other life. Another family. And he was using your money to fund it. I looked at the stack of cash on the crate. I looked at the documents. They were bank statements from a secret account. David had been transferring thousands of dollars every month for years. While I was working extra shifts at the hospital to save for a home, he was sending our future to someone else. You knew, I whispered, my voice sounding like it belonged to someone else. You knew all this time? I found the key a month after he died, my father said, walking into the unit. He kicked at one of the boxes. I kept it quiet because I thought I could use it later. And look at that. It's later. He reached down and grabbed my arm, pulling me up. His grip was tight and painful. Now here's what's going to happen. You're going to go home. You're going to tear up those eviction papers. You're going to give me and your mother the 50,000, and you're going to let us live in that house as long as we want. If you don't, I'll take this photo and these papers to the local news. I'll show everyone who David really was. I'll make sure Toby grows up knowing his hero father was a liar and a cheat. I looked at his face. He wasn't my father anymore. He was a monster. He was willing to destroy his own grandson's heart just to have a free room and some money. You're sick, I said, my voice shaking with rage. I'm a survivor, he spat back. Now get in the car. We have a lot of work to do. The drive back was a blur. The rain was coming down harder now, a heavy gray curtain that blocked out the rest of the world. My father hummed a little tune, a happy twisted sound that made my skin crawl. I didn't speak. I couldn't. My mind was racing. I thought about Toby sleeping in his bed, dreaming of his dad. I thought about the way he wore David's old fire department shirt as pajamas. If he found out about this, it would kill his spirit. He was only 7. He wasn't ready for the world to be this ugly. When we pulled into the driveway, the house looked different. It didn't look like a sanctuary anymore. It looked like a cage. We walked inside, and the smell of the pot roast was still lingering in the air. It felt like a lifetime ago that we were sitting at that table. My mother was standing in the kitchen, a glass of wine in her hand. She looked at us, her eyes searching my father's face. Did she see it? My mother asked. My father grinned. She saw it. She's going to be a good girl now, Martha. She's going to fix everything. My mother walked over and tried to pat my cheek. I flinched away from her like she was a hot stove. It's for the best, Sarah, she said smoothly. We're family. We should be together. We'll just forget all about those silly papers and the bank account. I stood in the middle of the hallway. I felt the weight of the secret in my pocket. I had swiped the photo when my father wasn't looking. It was pressing against my leg, a cold, hard reminder of the lie I was living. I need to check on Toby, I said, my voice flat. Go ahead, my father said, sitting back down in his recliner. He picked up the TV remote. But don't take too long. We need to call your lawyer and tell him you made a mistake. I walked down the hall. Every floorboard creaked. It felt like the house was crying. I opened Toby's door. The room was dark, lit only by the soft blue glow of his nightlight. He was curled up under his blankets, his breathing slow and even. I sat on the edge of his bed. I wanted to cry. I wanted to scream. I wanted to grab him and run as far away as possible. But where would we go? My parents had already stolen my savings. My husband had spent the rest on another family. I was broke, alone, and being blackmailed by my own blood. I looked at Toby's desk. There was a drawing he had made in school. It was a picture of him, me, and a man in a fire suit with a cape. The caption said, "My daddy is a hero." I felt a hot tear roll down my cheek. Suddenly, I heard a noise from the living room. It wasn't the TV. It was voices. Angry voices. I stood up and crept back toward the hallway. I stayed in the shadows watching. A third person was in the house. A woman. She was soaked from the rain, her hair matted to her forehead. She was holding a folder and she looked terrified. "Who are you?" I heard my father roar. "How did you get in here?" "The door was unlocked," the woman said, her voice trembling. She looked at my mother, then at my father. "I'm looking for Sarah Miller." I saw the news about the lawsuit. I saw the names in the legal section of the paper. I stepped out of the shadows. "I'm Sarah. Who are you?" The woman turned to me. Her eyes were the same color as the boy in the photo. My heart stopped. "My name is Elena," she said. "And I think we've both been lied to. But not by who you think." My father moved fast. He stood up, trying to get between me and the woman. "Get out of here. This is a private family matter." "No," Elena said, stepping back and opening her folder. "I've been looking for David's family for months. David wasn't my husband, Sarah. He was my brother. Or at least that's what he told me. He said his parents had abandoned him when he was a kid. He said he was all alone in the world." The room went cold. I looked at my parents. My mother's face had turned a strange, sickly green. My father's hands were shaking. "Brother," I whispered. David didn't have a sister. He was an only child. My parents told me they knew his whole family. That's because they're the ones who sent him away. Elena cried out, tears streaming down her face. I found the adoption papers, Sarah. David was their first son. But when he was 5, they decided they didn't want him anymore. They gave him up because he was too difficult. They erased him. And then they had you. I felt the world tilt. I looked at my parents, the people who had lived in my house, eaten my food, and called me a parasite. Is it true? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. Was David your son? My mother started to sob, but it wasn't a sad sound. It was the sound of a cornered animal. My father didn't say a word. He just stared at Elena with pure, unadulterated hatred. But Elena wasn't done. And that money, she said, looking at me. David wasn't funding another family. He was paying for my son's heart surgery. My son, your nephew. He was trying to fix what these people broke. He was trying to keep the only family he had left alive. I looked at the photo in my pocket. I looked at the boy. He wasn't a secret child. He was my nephew. David wasn't a cheater. He was a savior. And then the most terrifying thing happened. My father didn't look guilty. He didn't look sorry. He looked at the kitchen counter and grabbed the heavy steak knife I had used for the pot roast. You've ruined everything, he hissed, looking at Elena. You should have stayed buried. He took a step toward her, the knife gleaming under the dining room lights. Dad, stop! I screamed. But as I moved to grab him, the front door burst open. The police were there, guns drawn, led by the private investigator from earlier. Drop the knife, they shouted. But my father didn't drop it. He turned toward me, a crazed look in his eyes. And then he didn't go for me. He didn't go for Elena. He turned and ran down the hallway straight toward Toby's room. If I don't get this house, he screamed, nobody gets anything. I lunged for him, but I was too late. I heard the door to Toby's room slam shut and the lock click. What is my father going to do? Can I save my son from his own grandfather? And what other secrets are hidden in that storage unit? The sound of that lock clicking was like a gunshot in the quiet house. My heart didn't just race. It felt like it was trying to claw its way out of my chest. Toby! I screamed. I threw my entire weight against the bedroom door. Thud. The wood groaned, but it didn't budge. Dad, open this door. Don't you dare touch him. Inside, I heard Toby's muffled cry. He sounded confused and terrified. Mommy? Why is Grandpa in here? Why does he have a knife? Behind me, the hallway was a blur of motion. The police officers were shouting, their heavy boots thumping on the carpet. My mother was wailing in the kitchen, a high, thin sound that reminded me of a wounded animal. But all I could see was that white door. Move aside, a police officer yelled, grabbing my shoulder to pull me back. But I didn't move. I couldn't. This was my son. My everything. I looked at the door handle and then at the floor. I remembered the old trick David had shown me when we first moved in. The hinges on these old doors were on the outside. The pins. I screamed at the officer. Take the hinges off. The officer didn't hesitate. He pulled a heavy tool from his belt and slammed it against the metal pins. Clang, clang, clang. On the third hit, the top pin popped out. I didn't wait for the second one. I kicked the door right next to the handle. With the top hinge gone, the wood twisted and snapped. The door leaned inward, and the officer shoved it the rest of the way. I burst into the room. My father was standing by the window. He wasn't holding Toby. He was standing over Toby's desk, the knife raised high. He looked like a man who had lost his mind. He wasn't looking at my son. He was looking at a photo of David that Toby kept on his nightstand. He was supposed to be gone, my father hissed, his eyes wide and glassy. We erased him. He was a mistake, and he came back to ruin me through you. He slammed the knife down, not into Toby, but into the desk, pinning David's photo to the wood. The officers tackled him a second later. They threw him to the floor, the metal of the handcuffs clicking shut with a finality that made me burst into tears. My father didn't fight back. He just lay there on the rug sobbing about his house and his life. I ran to Toby. He was curled in the corner of his bed, clutching his stuffed dinosaur. I wrapped my arms around him so tight I could feel his heart beating against mine. Thump thump, thump thump. It's okay, baby, I whispered into his hair. It's over. Promise. It's over. The next few hours felt like a dream. The rain kept falling, washing the dust off the driveway. I watched from the porch as the police led my father to one car and my mother to another. My mother didn't look at me. She kept her head down, her silk robe soaked and clinging to her thin frame. She looked small. She looked like a stranger. Elena, David's sister, stayed with me. We sat on the front steps, the cold air biting at our skin. She handed me the folder she had brought. Inside were letters David had written to her. I opened the first one. The handwriting was unmistakably his, the messy loops, the way he crossed his T's. Dear Elena, it read. I found out Sarah is pregnant. I'm going to have a son. I promise he will never know the coldness I felt. I'm saving every penny to make sure he has a home that is full of light. I'm sorry I can't tell Sarah about you yet. I'm still afraid of what my parents would do if they found out I tracked you down. But one day we will all be a family. I closed the folder and tucked it against my chest. David hadn't been a parasite. He had been a bridge. He was trying to heal a family that had been broken long before I was ever born. 1 month later, the house felt different. The smell of cigar smoke was gone. I had hired a professional crew to deep clean every inch of the place. We repainted the living room a soft, warm cream color. The recliner was gone, replaced by a bookshelf filled with stories Toby and I read together. The 24-hour deadline had passed a long time ago. My parents were facing charges for grand theft and child endangerment. My lawyer said they would likely lose everything. I didn't feel happy about it, but I didn't feel sad either. I just felt free. It was a Saturday morning. The sun was streaming through the kitchen window, making the floorboards glow. I was making pancakes, the kind with chocolate chips that Toby loves. The doorbell rang. Toby ran to the door, his feet pattering happily on the wood. I'll get it. I followed him. Standing on the porch was Elena. Beside her was a little boy with messy curls and bright, curious eyes. My nephew. Toby looked at the boy. The boy looked at Toby. It was like looking into a mirror across time. Hi, Toby said, tilting his head. Do you like dinosaurs? The boy smiled, and it was David's smile. I like the big ones. The ones that roar. Elena looked at me, her eyes wet with tears. I reached out and took her hand, pulling her into the warmth of the house. Come in, I said. You're home. As I closed the door, I looked at the spot on the wall where the framed photos hung. There was a new one there. It was a photo of David in his firefighter gear, but next to it was the photo of him and Elena. Two halves of a life finally put back together. I realized then that my father was wrong. We weren't parasites. We were survivors. We were a family built not on blood and secrets, but on truth and love. I walked back into the kitchen, the sound of the boys laughing in the living room filling the house. For the first time in 6 months, the air didn't feel heavy. It felt light. Felt like peace. Life can be incredibly messy. People we love can hurt us in ways we never imagined. But the beauty of being human is that we get to choose who we let into our house. We get to choose who our family is. I hope you enjoyed this story. Please let me know in the comments where you're watching from. Each and every one of your comments warms my heart, and I read them all with love. If you enjoy these types of stories, check out these 2 videos as well, and subscribe to join our journey. There are many more untold stories waiting for you on the channel. Wishing you all the best, until the next episode.